though behind that, clearing skies will allow temperatures to drop, so we could just see a touch of grass frost here to start Wednesday. That cold front will make its way sporadically southeastwards through Wednesday, bringing quite patchy rain throughout the day and cloudy skies, particularly across East Anglia and southeast England for much of the day. Behind this, though, skies will clear, allowing for plenty of sunshine, but also some scattered showers that could be wintry over high ground. Now, as we go into Wednesday evening, that rain will start to clear away from the southeast, though it may linger for a time, and it will still be quite cloudy here as well overnight. Though behind that, skies will clear once again as we go into Thursday, so another patchy frost around, particularly across Wales, Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we could see some icy stretches on roads and pavements, particularly for Scotland and Northern England. As we go into the start of Thursday, it will be another cloudy start across the far southeast with some rain still lingering. But for elsewhere, there'll be plenty of sunshine to start the day, though rain will start to make its way in across northern Scotland, bringing some strong winds too. So it's quite an unsettled start to the outlook, but becoming increasingly dry by the weekend with temperatures around average.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes, already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. That that opening music is way too macho for me. It's Bev Turner. I'm in the 8 o'clock slot all this week. Coming up tonight, as Sturgeon recedes into the background to the theme tune Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, the battle for her replacement commences. We're off to a fiery start with Kate Forbes losing key backers after her comments about gay marriage and abortion. Wasn't it inevitable that such views would count her out? We're going to be discussing that. Now, put that dinner down. A British university is calling for rationing. That's right, rationing of energy and food in order to combat climate change. Are we honestly meant to see human progress as living smaller, less satisfying lives? What will my panellist, Ken Livingstone, creator of the congestion charge, no less, think about that? And a Freedom of Information Act has uncovered that the Met Police have compiled a list of contentious statues and monuments, as they call them, including the cenotaph and Winston Churchill. They're scared that the perpetually offended might try and pull them down. Why? The only man who could possibly solve that dilemma is also on my panel tonight, Dr. David Starkey. And anyone who's been shopping recently will know that the high street is in its final death throes. But have we really thought through the reality of a country in which we do everything from the isolation of our kitchen tables via an app? We're going to be joined by a councillor who thinks the decline of our beloved town centres is due to the merciless war on the car. I tend to agree. So send me your thoughts and questions, please, for David Starkey and Ken Livingstone. GBViews at gbnews.uk. That's all coming up after the latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Bev, thank you. Good evening. Our top story tonight, the US President Joe Biden says the United States is going to be announcing new sanctions against Russia this week. Joe Biden was speaking to thousands gathered in the centre of Warsaw, and he told the crowds that the Ukrainian people's love of their country would prevail in the war against Russia. It also follows talks he held this afternoon with the President of Poland, a day after his surprise visit to Ukraine. The two leaders today addressed security issues and growing NATO's presence in Poland.
The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war is never a necessity. It's a tragedy.
Well, earlier, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Russia's decision to suspend its participation in a nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major State of the Nation speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also bitterly accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has now summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account.
Here, the Chancellor's under pressure to improve public sector pay rises for workers after official figures show state finances are in stronger shape than predicted. The Office for National Statistics has revealed the government reported a monthly surplus of £5.4 billion in January. The surprising number is mainly because of self-assessment income tax. But Jeremy Hunt, who's due to set out his plans for tax and spending in the budget on March the 15th, has played down the significance of the surplus to national finances. Supermarkets are going to be rationing a growing list of fruits and vegetables. Asda is one of the supermarkets that will allow customers a maximum of just 3 items from a list of 8, which includes tomatoes, broccoli and raspberries. Morrison's will be following suit from Wednesday. Bad weather across Europe and Africa is being blamed for the disruption in supply chains, with retailers warning it could go on for weeks. And lastly, the Princess of Wales visited a care home for elderly people today in Berkshire. And as it's Pancake Day, Kate picked up some batter, a spatula and a frying pan to flip up some culinary treats. However, even the princess had to admit she didn't have much of a flair for it. She said her children may even boycott her pancakes after seeing her attempt, which she called a congealed blob. Happy Pancake Down. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel, and Bev Turner's in for Laurence Fox.
So, Kate Forbes and Humza Yousaf, two of the candidates who stepped forward to take over the SNP reins following the shock resignation of Nicola of the North last week. And what an odd couple they make. About the only thing that unites them is the desire to break up the United Kingdom. If it comes down to these two, those Scots, the seditious ones at least, have a big choice on their hands about the future of their country, especially if they eventually do get what they ultimately want, independence. Humza Yousaf, the Health Secretary who oversaw the longest A&E waiting times on record, would probably be Sturgeon's continuity candidate. He's no stranger to a gaffe, as we see here. At least he's not in Lycra. Oops. But the boy has the same smiley-faced totalitarian progressive instincts as dear Nicola. He supported the gender bill, of course, and in his old job as Justice Secretary, he introduced the controversial hate crime bill, which could see those deemed to be insulting towards protected groups jailed for up to 7 years. He even told MSPs you could be prosecuted for statements made over your own dinner table. Free speech might not be the top of his agenda, but at least he apologised today for being fined 300 quid for driving a pal's car without insurance. Kate Forbes, on the other hand, seems to have been born sometime in the 1860s, fallen down a wormhole one misty morning up on the Highlands and reappeared on a Sky News interview in 2023, spouting off about the ills of abortion and homosexual marriage. Although, being fair to her, she has said that these are her personal views stemming from her religious background and that she wouldn't roll back any of the freedoms people currently enjoy. Oh, that's OK, then. Perhaps these two positions are more consequential than that of breaking up the union, because a bit like Brexit, independence on its own is just a rejection of something. It's not an active position. Without a clear plan for the kind of society you want, there's a danger of it withering on the thistle. Well, one man who understands Mrs. Forbes' views and how they'll affect her campaign, and if actually they'd ever have a chance of being enacted, is Gavin Ashenden, Catholic layman and editor of the Catholic Herald. Good evening, Gavin.
Hello, Bev. Good evening.
Good evening. Was it sensible, do you think, of Kate Forbes to come out with these views at this time?
I think it's political suicide. but the trouble is she went into politics as a Christian, and she is a Christian, and she happens to believe, as all Christians do, that marriage is best between a man and a woman. And it seems to me that's about the only view that our liberal pluralistic society won't allow.
Oh, I think there's lots of views that aren't currently allowed. But is it right when she says, well, these are only my personal views, it wouldn't affect any policy? That can't be genuine, can it?
Well, of course it is, because everybody has their own preferred moral outlook. But there are very few people who, in a liberal pluralistic society, want to impose that on other people. We don't do that. She set out to govern society according to the SNP's agenda, and the fact that she doesn't want to practice abortion and that she's not gay and she wants to be married, that's got nothing to do with the public policies she would be elected to represent. There's a kind of sort of almost like a paranoia that there's an assumption that Christians want to make everybody live like them, and they don't. It's a matter of free choice.
But you say that she may not. It's not that she doesn't want to practice abortion. She's actually off on maternity leave at the moment, actually, coincidentally, as we speak. But I think it does play into the idea that a candidate like that is just not living in 2023 and therefore can't relate to the electorate. I mean, you know, she was saying, it went so far as to say, you know, that sex should only be within marriage. How can we put any sort of decision-making about sex education in schools or contraception access for teenagers or for anyone, frankly, that isn't married in the hands of somebody that thinks like that?
Yeah, but that's a very odd view to have. It assumes that progress only goes in one direction. The fact is, all these matters are open to argument. What works better? What makes the best happiness? What gives society the greatest stability? The things that we're doing at the moment don't work very well for society. They're great for liberal choice. But are you saying that nobody's allowed to argue for a different way of doing sex and a different way of doing marriage? That would be ludicrous.
I think there are some fundamental things that have changed in society that the vast majority of the population would agree with, which is that sex outside of marriage is OK, if not to be encouraged, and that abortion is an option for some people at some times in their life. And for somebody to state quite publicly that they don't agree with those two very basic freedoms that we have, I think is odd, frankly.
But are you saying that people who believe in sex outside marriage have closed minds and they can't consider any other possibility? There are some very good reasons psychologically and sociologically and in terms of sexual health in the way in which we do sex. The idea that what we've come upon at the moment is simply the very best possible way of human beings managing their personal relationships is indefensible. There are different ways. We should be open to talking about them.
We are, and that's why we are talking about them. And I guess you would argue, therefore, that she has a right to say this. But as you say, it is political suicide. Those views are, frankly, I'm pleased that they are niche now. I'm not judging having a faith. That's wonderful. I would applaud anybody that has a Christian faith or any faith of any particular hue. I applaud that. I respect that. But I think for somebody who wants to lead a main political party in 2023 to say that sex should only be in marriage and that they don't believe in gay marriage is archaic.
Well, but why are they asking the same things of Mr. Youssef? Islam believes exactly the same things. Why is there no fuss about the fact that he's Muslim and these are Islamic views, and that both candidates actually share the same views about private morality? Why is it only the Christian who's getting in the neck and being told that it's political suicide?
Well, I guess you make a very good point, and I don't disagree with that at all. I guess she's the only one who has come out and said this at this particular time. And as you say, it won't go down well with them. Sorry, go on, Gavin. She's the only one who's being asked about it. Well, the fact is, everyone knows that Youssef is a Muslim, and everyone also knows that the views that Laura Forbes holds are the same as Muslim views. But none of the reporters are asking him what his faith teaches and whether he believes in it or not. He's getting a completely free pass. That can't be right in a free and open society. Well, I don't agree. I would love to ask him that question. I don't know if anybody has particularly asked him this question, and I would hope that we have the opportunity to hear him answer that. And as you say, that will therefore be a more level playing field. Maybe we are giving her a hard time. She's come out and said, people want, what does she say, longing for a politician to answer straight questions with straight answers, which seems apt for somebody that doesn't believe in gay marriage. But out of these two candidates, I think it's fair to say that Kate Forbes would have your vote.
Well, I think it was very refreshing to hear what she thought a woman was. And when she said a woman is not somebody who can commit rape, I think I and a whole lot of other people breathed a huge sigh of relief. The fact is, it's probably more important for a politician to have moral principles that they hold to in their own lives, some kind of personal integrity, than it is the notion that they don't want to impose on other people. I think it's a very welcome thing to have a politician that has integrity. And that because she doesn't want to impose her views on others, we should respect her. I think it's very welcome.
Well, Gavin, I respect your views. I love the fact that you've come on here and discussed it with me. And no doubt this will be the first of many conversations around Kate Forbes. Thank you so much for joining me, Gavin Ashenden, there, Catholic layman and editor of The Catholic Herald. What do you make of it all? GBviews at gbnews.uk is the email. I'm going to be talking to my panel in just a moment. They're here with me. Former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, and historian Dr. David Starkey are here tonight as new research calling for ridiculous measures to combat climate change. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Bev Turner tonight on the 8 o'clock slot. We've seen climate change hysteria take its grip on our country over the past few years. Everything from pouring soup on Van Gogh's sunflowers to Black Lives Matter blocking airport runways because climate change is also apparently racist. Don't even get me started. Whilst many would dismiss these instances as a few loud-mouthed eccentrics amidst an otherwise reasonable and well-intentioned agenda, it's impossible to deny that it's also backed by our institutions. Well, Leeds University have just released research recommending Second World War-style rationing of petrol, household energy and meat to combat climate change. So whilst your grandparents may have done their bit by donating scrap metal, working in munitions factories or indeed going off to fight, we've now just all become lycra-clad, bike-riding vegetarians for the greater good. Kind of researchers, at least, concede this was the unpalatable option. Ken Livingstone, David Starkey are here with me. Ken, this can all be traced back to you starting the congestion charge. It's all your fault, isn't it? Can you believe how far we've come?
Well, look, when I brought in the congestion charge, before then, central London was gridlocked. People were just stuck in their cars.
It is now!
Have you ever been in central London recently? It's gridlocked now. There's 12% less cars came into London. Pollution went down 12%. But what we got to say to people, look, you've got to get out of cars, use public transport, because the pollution you're producing, the damage you do to the environment is devastating.
I'm so tired of having this conversation, but it's such an important conversation to have, I think, in that that's a lovely idea in a sort of utopian ideal if London was just a village where everybody tottered around and it was always 25 degrees outside. But on a dark, rainy, cold night when you've got to be ferrying children around, and what do you want people to do under those circumstances?
Well, in all my life, I've never driven a car. I've just always used public transport or walked. And that's very good for your health, actually. I mean...
Doesn't look it, can I say, Ken? You're not exactly a shining example of robust health. I'm a year older than you, and I look a damn sight better. And I sit in the car whenever I can. I also understand there's a purpose for cities. Cities are about connectivity. The reason you live in a city is because you want to be able to get around. Cities, it's a fundamental of civilization. It's the fundamental of capitalism. It's the reason Ken and I were discussing before we came in.
It's better to sit on the bus and have a chat to someone else.
No, it's not. I mean, it depends whether you have anything serious. Let me finish. It's really important. It depends whether you have anything serious to do. Cities are the foundation of civilization, and what people like Ken are doing with... For the moment, I will concede good motives. They are deliberately killing our economy. Wherever you look, it is being deliberately...
killing the planet. Literally.
Who cares?
We've got to change the way...
No, this is nonsense.
Or, by the middle of this... I mean, 10 years ago, I feared by the end of this century we could face extinction from climate change.
But we have... This is rubbish. This is rubbish. No, sorry. You're a believer in...
Look at the violent weather all over the world.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Look here in Britain. There was snow on the ground every winter in London when I was a kid. I was in about 3 days so far this year. And every summer now is hotter than we've ever had before. Last summer, on that hottest day, 2,000 Londoners died from the heat.
But you must know that we are what we've experienced, what we have measured, is a tiny period.
When I mean, again, Ken's memory is so short. Back in the 1970s, the great panic was we were going to have a new ice age. Human beings can cope perfectly easily with increased temperatures. An ice age would be completely catastrophic. And you can put forward a very good argument that the only reason we've not had another ice age, because we had one until the 1940s, we had another one in the late 19th century, we had a terrible one in the 16th and 17th centuries, is industrialisation. The great problem with Ken's position, listen to what he says. We've got an emergency. It's panic. It's terror. What he's trying to do is exactly what these fools in the University of Leeds are trying to do. They're trying to panic us. Human beings have coped with everything that's been thrown at them, providing you've not had false
It's not about panic. I've got 5 kids. I don't want them to die in their middle life.
Of course you don't.
And
nor do I.
Weather, every week now on the news, there's a massive violent weather event somewhere in the world. That's much, much worse than when you and I were growing up.
Sorry, but again,
isn't it the arrogance of man to think that we can do much about that in our lifetime, though?
We can. We just need to consume less. We need to waste
Were you
less.
saying you all want us to be poor?
Socialising with each other.
You want us to be
poor. In that post-war world, you spent most of your time socialising with friends, neighbours, workmates. Now, people are just much more isolated. They're consuming.
But that's because of so much of the eco-zealotry is encouraging us to live these smaller lives. We talked about they're calling for rations.
But Bev,
consume less. Sit in your house.
Bev, I grew up. Ken and I are roughly the same age. He was clearly content with that shitty, boring world of the 1950s, which was narrow. It was narrow. It was mean. There was awful food. I spent my life wanting to escape. He clearly spent his life wanting to suck other people into this awful boredom. I am on the side of the future. You belong to a pre-modern past. And so why won't you admit it? You would like us to go back to hands huddling in the middle of winter.
I need to apologise for your bad language, Dr. David Stark.
No, huddling. I said huddling.
An animal that spends time collectively with friends, neighbours. And now so many people are living in a tiny little flat, angry, on their computer.
That's because it was built by a socialist government.
People are scared to use public transport. Because the most random acts of violence I've ever seen in my lifetime have been on trains, they've been on buses, and this does affect the poor. It's the people who can't afford to get a taxi back from the pub. Those are the people that are being forced onto public transport.
I've used buses and tubes all my life. I've never seen an act of violence once in my life.
Well, that might be because you're a man. Like, it's different for women.
Well, no, I'm
it's
pretty
different
weedy,
for young
man.
girls. Yeah, but, and you were Mayor of London for quite a long time. You probably got quite a lot of positive attention possibly on those transports. I think your experience...
And some abuse.
I'm sure you did, yeah, absolutely. But this idea, though, David, of I agree we have to consume less, all right?
Why?
Hang on. It's too easy to go to these cheap shops. You go to your shops where everything's a quid and you buy a load of plastic tap for the kids and it all ends up in the bin. We can all do better at wasting money on this stuff that goes to landfill. I agree with that. But what I don't like is the idea that we have to start rationing our food in order to save the planet. Because you know who's not rationing the food? The rich, the super rich.
Sorry, this is all getting into the sand and it's getting very silly. The plain truth is that there is no climate emergency. There is no emergency about population. There is no emergency about the amount of goods that are available to people.
What about the storm that just hit?
Sorry, can I? Look, sorry, you've talked a lot. Let me just finish this. We are in a world in which we are able to generate excess. Right back to the early 19th century, there was this notion that was peddled by Malthus that the population of the world would exceed its resources. That notion has been demonstrated to be conclusively, absolutely wrong. When Ken and I were growing up, there were all these myths, which Ken, I'm sure, helped to peddle. There was going to be starvation in India. India has never produced more rice than it does now because of science and because of agriculture. In other words, this attempt at saying we've all got to cut back because there's an emergency, there's a war on climate change, is complete myth-making. And do you know what? It's people like Ken who wanted to control us. Ken was I will give Ken one great credit. You were an extraordinary administrator. What you did, now this is really important, what you did when you were Mayor of London was to create a straitjacket, a corset for London, which is the most ruinous since it had walls in the Middle Ages. It is wholly destructive. It was brilliantly conceived. Its final purpose is catastrophic. And your successor as the current mayor is destroying the economy of London. These people in Leeds will destroy the national and the international economy because rationing, the sort of thing that you did with the congestion charge, has been proved everywhere, above all in the kinds of countries you loved, like the Soviet Union or Cuba, to be an utter catastrophe.
Look, literally, if we want our children to have a nice life,
this is rubbish.
We've got to stop you look all around the world. There are more and more violent weather events all the time. You look here in Britain.
The number of people dying in them is tiny.
Listen,
tiny.
You look back, we used to have snow on the ground every winter.
You said that once.
And now we've hardly seen any for
You've said it twice.
About 3 days. And
3 times.
Every summer is hotter than before. And it's now hot enough.
Hotter since the 19th century.
No, it's hotter now, year by year by year. And last summer,
Since
on that
when?
hottest day, 2,000 Brits died from the heat.
People die anyway.
We've got to tackle it.
But I'm sort of fascinated by this idea that if we want our children to have a good future, right now I'm worried about my children.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, I cast a thought to one day having grandchildren, but I want my children to be able to use a car, and I can take them in the car for safety reasons. I like the locks on my door. I don't want to be walking around the streets and getting the buses and tubes, which are expensive and dirty and overcrowded and horrible.
What makes your kids' life good is the time they spend with friends and so on. And that's the world that's sort of almost been eroded. We grew up in a world where you spent so much time with friends and neighbours. Now, very often, people are just stuck at home.
You've said that before already, Ken. So
It's true.
But you can connect, though, the drive for a smaller life, rationing of food, rationing of travel.
Yeah, we need to do all that.
Can you connect that, though, with the fact that that keeps people apart?
No, it doesn't keep people... Plan so we spend more time with each other. And it literally, if I look back, we grew up in a world where we were part of community. Now there's so many people living alone in a little flat,
throttling and me. You were talking about gay liberation. Gay liberation was liberation from exactly that community of the 1950s that you're talking about. The other thing that Ken has forgotten to say, as we discuss in coming in, was people of our parents' generation died in their 50s and 60s. The reason they live now is modern medicine. Modern medicine depends on...
good diets.
But it depends on, above all, on economic progress. And he wants to kill it I want to see it triumph. And do you know what? I want to see all those people in the third world able to share what we have.
Yep,
Ken's recipe is designed to make us as poor as they are.
I have to interrupt you. We've got another 30 minutes of this to come, and I would like to issue an apology for Dr. David Starkey's terrible language there.
Which was what?
Now then, I'll tell you in the break. Coming up next, could more contentious statues be at risk of vandalism? The Met Police seem to think so. See you in 3.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, after the devastating discovery of Nicola Bulley's body, bringing a tragic end to one of the most widely criticised investigations in recent times. Has the controversial handling of the case made you lose faith in the police? Plus, as reports claim Meghan is upset over her South Park roasting, Samantha Markle hits back in an exclusive interview. And it'll be another night of unfiltered opinion from Nigel Farage, Tom Bauer and Baroness Kate Hoey. Join Dan 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. only on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Bev Turner here. A Freedom of Information Act, the Met Police has revealed that several statues in London listed as contentious may be prone to attack because of their links to war, imperialism or slavery. The FOI submitted by the think tank The Policy Exchange concluded that the statues prone to attack are the Cenotaph, Cromwell, Sir Robert Peel, Earl Mountbatten of Burma and Gandhi. The Policy Exchange has accused the police of a decline in order within the direct vicinity of Westminster, leaving it exposed to these attacks. Right, still with me are Ken Livingstone and David Starkey. David, as our historian, I will come to you first. What do you make of this information that's come out of this Freedom of Information Act?
Frankly, it's pitiable. The thought that you would attack a statue of Gandhi, who is interestingly enough, the direct opponent. What's fascinating is it's both Churchill and Gandhi.
Yeah.
The two men who were in opposition over the freedom of India and originally the idea of granting dominion status and then full independence to India is fundamentally about saying no human being is allowed to have any flaw at all. It's a false view of humanity. All of us, even Ken, has got flaws. I have abundant. I'm sure you do, because you're a perfect and a woman. But the reason those statues go up is that those people did something great. Often many things that are great. But equally, of course, they have flaws, and they particularly have flaws if you read history backwards. But the fact that we think you're therefore, you, petty little non-entity of a person, are entitled to besmirch, literally, physically, by defacing a monument to those people who were great, did great things, and above all, give you the freedom to deface their monument. Yeah. Imagine if Churchill had not led us to victory in the Second World War, we would be subject to the kind of worlds that Ken was once very keen on. Ken was terribly keen on dictatorships. He loved Cuba. He adored the Soviet Union. He pranced with all of these people. And you know what? I think if Ken were honest, it would say that it should actually inhibit him from saying anything on this subject at all. Because if you went out, if you went, no, but I'm just asking if he were honest. He likes to play being honest. But imagine if in the era when you were prancing with all the leaders in Cuba, you had gone and defaced a statue of the great founder, the cigar-smoking old villain, Castro. You would have not experienced a slap on the wrist. No. They wouldn't have boarded up the statue. They'd have done something horrible. And what I think is...
No one should ever attack a statue of any of our previous politicians, because we need to understand their history. We need to know what they did, the good things and the bad things. And it was appalling to watch people attacking statues recently. I mean, that's part of our history. We need to understand our history and respect our past, but then make sure we don't repeat these mistakes in the future.
Sadiq Khan, at the moment, I think, has a commission, doesn't he, looking at what historical monuments, plaques, statues...
Editing the past.
...might be worth
editing the past.
taking down. You must find that worrying.
I wouldn't take any statue down. We just need to have, on the bottom of them, an honest account of what those politicians...
But who would write it? You see, this is the problem.
I'd be prepared to do it if they pay me enough.
I'm sure, and it would be rubbish, because there is no such thing as a single honest account. What I think those statues should be there for is objects of debate. I mean, let me give you an illustration. For many years, I sat on something that Ken was once upon a time responsible for, which was the Blue Plaque Committee.
Oh, did you?
And what I wanted to do was to recognise that people are varied. Yeah. So there is the well-known architect who was responsible, I better not mention his name, because I was charged with uttering a rude word, who was responsible for the horror, which is the Knightsbridge Barracks.
Right.
There was a huge campaign to have a blue plaque on the house. I said, I will agree to this, providing what appears on that plaque is architect and vandal. And, you know, this is really what we're talking about. Yeah. We're talking about the diversity and the difference of human beings. But the problem is the people who are doing this, the Black Lives campaigners, the IRA sympathisers, again, something else Ken was rather fond on, the Sinn Féin sympathisers who are daubing statues. What they want, of course, is a world which just corresponds to their view. They're not interested.
But when I became the leader of the Great London Council, the IRA was letting off a bomb every year in London.
I remember vividly.
People. The Thatcher government was refusing to negotiate with them. I started a dialogue, and Thatcher refused to take up on that. And the first time I met Gerry Adams, he made it absolutely clear, we know we can never defeat the British Army, we need to do a deal. Tragically, Thatcher did
Shall we talk about statues?
Then when Blair came
Shall we
to
talk
power,
about statues?
He got that deal within the space of a year.
I think you're forgetting John Major's role, but let's talk about statues.
But what do you think's happened, Ken? That there are people who are so easy to offend and get so angry at history, at the past, at sort of an ideology which possibly, potentially died with that person.
But you actually look, every nation and culture has appalling things in its past. We need to be honest and recognise that. I mean, the world isn't as bad as it once used to be, but still, terrible things are going on.
But shouldn't we equally recognise the glorious? And this is one of the things that's gone so hideously wrong in Britain, that Britain and America, the so-called Anglosphere, literally invent modernity, they invent industrialisation, they invent freedom. Africa has no notion of freedom, Asia has no notion of freedom, and no notion of rights whatever. They're all invented literally around this place. That they Ken, just one second, and then you come back. They're invented round Westminster. Westminster is the cradle of a new civilisation, of our civilisation. A world in which the idea is an ideal, that government depends on debate, it doesn't depend on guns or force. And by trashing Westminster, you are trashing that belief in debate, in reason, above all in freedom, liberty and the future. And this is the problem, Ken. Your belief that everything is shuttering down, that we've got to start rationing, denying, is the absolute opposite of that world of Westminster. It's that world of Westminster that gave us freedom. Yes, I believe...
Right.
I believe... No.
Britain and America created these major advances and all of that, but they also did terrible things.
Of course.
Look in America, they treated black people as slaves.
Yes,
so did we.
But so did every nation. So the only thing that's new about Britain...
Just recognise the truth.
Yeah, I will recognise the truth. But the great truth is that every other civilisation, including particularly black Africa, and particularly the Islamic world, had slavery. There was only one civilisation that did anything about it. It was yours and mine. Yeah. But sorry, this is the important thing. In history, it is the unusual and the exceptional that matters.
Well, absolutely right. Our past has been to create the modern civilisation we now understand. But we also need to recognise it is having an impact on the environment. We also have to tackle that. Not by winding it all down, but just stopping waste, stopping pollution.
But do you think it's...
doesn't the rest of the world want...
Isn't it a good use of police resources, though, with these statues, to be worrying about them, to be keeping a record of where there might be an outbreak of violence or graffiti?
Well, let me just say to you, to anyone watching this programme who wants to go and attack a statue, you're wrong. Those statues depict our past. We need to see them, understand them, recognise the good and the bad of the people that are on that statue. The idea people are want to demolish a statue is nonsense.
But isn't the other quick thing is the disgraceful behaviour of our police, in which they regard the right to protest, in other words, the right to deface, to daub, as more important than their duty to protect the great monuments of our political culture. It's the disgrace of the police which should be the centre of this.
Right. You are watching the Bev Turner Can't Get a Word in Edgeway show here on GB News. Coming up next, when's the last time you visited your local high street? What was once the life and centre of all communities is currently in terminal decline. I'm going to be talking to a local Wolverhampton councillor about the situation in his hometown. Back in 2.
I'm in Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go. But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Laurence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. This is Laurence Fox, identifying as Bev Turner. Now, thanks to lockdown and a wave of anti-motorist legislation, the Great British High Street is on its backside. The administrators are being called in, household names are shutting up shop, and we're becoming a nation of ghost towns. Conservative councillor Simon Bennett from Wolverhampton has been dealing with this issue on his own patch, and he joins me now. Simon, good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. It feels like, I don't know about you, but it feels like we're in the middle of this historic industrial change. It's happening before our very eyes, and I, for one, am worried that we have not thought this through. What do you think the social implications will be of the demise of the high street?
To be honest, I think the high streets have, over a long period of time, been... there's been a slow demise over a long period of time where actually we probably could have actually done more to protect the high street. So, before we start thinking about the social aspects of the impact on our high streets, it's how we got there in the first place. Particularly in Wolverhampton, where we've seen over the last 50 years of Labour controlling Wolverhampton, not enough done to bring investment into the city centre to protect the businesses that are already there. The hearts of our communities are generally our sort of high streets, our shopping precincts, and those are where the investment needs to go. We've got a lot of capital projects going on in Wolverhampton at the moment, but I think the priorities are in the wrong place. Never mind bringing, pedestrianised zones into the city centres that keep cars out. We want to be allowing cars to continue to come in and that brings the footfall into the city centres and allows those businesses to thrive.
I love it, Simon. Right. So you are a man who is not prepared to take this lying down. When I ask you what the social changes this is, thinking you're going to go, well, everyone's going to be isolated, no one's ever going to meet anyone, we're going to have a mental health epidemic, and it's just going to be disastrous. You're going, no, I'm not ready to let this go yet. Good. You're my kind of man, Simon. So why is there this resistance within councils? Why are they so anti-car? I know it's about saving the planet, but why does nobody care more about saving the shops?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to not just the anti-motorist and anti-business sort of aspects to it. It is the anti-business aspect of it as well. We want to see our businesses grow and increase in Wolverhampton, but when you've got bus lanes and bus gates that sort of generate, in 2022, Wolverhampton Council nearly £1 million in bus lane fines last year. In 2021, it was £700,000. So these are seen as cash cows to the local authority now. So they don't need to. They don't need the cars coming into the city centre. They're getting their money from other means. They don't need the businesses in the city centre. And it's taken actually in Wolverhampton local businesses to come together, and particularly one local business owner to put the money forward himself to do an independent review into the city centre and our high street in Wolverhampton to work out where we've gone wrong, why we've gone wrong, and why the council isn't doing more to support those businesses.
So I'm not entirely familiar with Wolverhampton's city centre, Simon, I can't lie. But what has the difference been? What does it look like now compared to, say, probably as little as 3 or 4 years ago?
I mean, you could probably, in the last 10 years since I've been going out in the nighttime economy, I've seen a drastic decline in the amount of nightclubs, bars, restaurants that you can actually access in the city centre. I would say, actually, on a walk round today, there are more empty shops, I'd say, than there is trading shops in Wolverhampton.
Wow.
Why are those shops empty? And there's more moving out. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen another 2 or 3 shops. And I spoke to one on the weekend that's a bar that gets a lot of money from the football trade when the Wolves are at home, and they're already talking about selling up and moving on because it just isn't right for them anymore. The city centre isn't a place where they can make money anymore, and it hasn't been helped by some of the leisure sub aspects of the city centre. So Civic Halls in Wolverhampton, quite a famous name, the local music and comedy venue that's been closed for the last 8 years, and a number of setbacks and increasing the budget. It's 5 times over budget, and in that time, a lot of businesses have gone because they were reliant on that footfall from those kind of things, from having the football there in the city, which I tell you now, if we hadn't got a Premier League football club, I would be even more worried for our city centre and the long-term future for a lot of the independent businesses in our city centre. I mean, I can see Marks and Spencer moving out of the high street soon as well. I don't see any of these businesses hanging around anymore.
And it's not just Wolverhampton. You're a brilliant example of this. Your hometown is a brilliant example of where it's going downhill very, very quickly, but we are seeing it all around the country. Of course, some would say this is just progress. This is just how we have to move forward. Everybody is going to be shopping online anyway, as much as they do now. It's not worth it for retail to hold stock on a high street. It's better to have it in a warehouse, and you order it on your computer and it arrives via Amazon at your front door, via the delivery man at your front door. Is there any chance of stemming this tide? Do we just have to accept it's happening?
No, there's definitely a lot that can be done, and I've been to many cities and towns across the country through what I do in my personal life. I travel quite a bit, and I see other places that are thriving. They've got a range of different businesses, premium ones. In Wolverhampton, we've just got pound shops, and that's what we're starting to get to the stage now, where we've got these cheap high street clothing shops, rather than anything that's people can go to Birmingham on the train for a couple of quid. Why would they stay in Wolverhampton when they can get out of the city and to areas that are providing those facilities? They can go to Telford nearby, where there's free parking. Labour Council in Wolverhampton won't introduce free parking. That is one way of allowing people back into the city centre. People will shop where it's most convenient. If there's a lack of parking spaces that are free, if there are obstacles in getting into the city centre. But as you say, the high streets are changing. Amazon doesn't pop up overnight. It's been around for a number of years now. Okay, it was during COVID where they really came into their own and were able to get things to people very quickly and kept people with things that they needed to keep themselves in the right frame of mind.
But the pace of change has been incredibly quick.
The nature of our high streets in terms of getting people back in, the footfall, changing the nature of them. Can we get people?
And it has to be appealing. Simon, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know Dan Watton is waiting around the corner. Simon Bennett there, Conservative councillor from Wolverhampton. Dan will be up next. I have been Bev Turner. I will be back on GB News at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you then.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. It's been quite a mild start to the week, but it's all change as we go into Wednesday as colder air makes its way in from the northwest. This is all due to a low pressure system just to the south of Iceland that's bringing a cold front southeastwards across the UK throughout tonight and into Wednesday morning. So this will be a band of cloud with some rain in it as well, quite heavy across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England for a time tonight. Ahead of that, they'll be mostly dry, though quite cloudy, so temperatures here will still be remaining mild for one last night really, though behind that, clearing skies will allow temperatures to drop, so we could just see a touch of grass frost here to start Wednesday. That cold front will make its way sporadically southeastwards through Wednesday, bringing quite patchy rain throughout the day and cloudy skies, particularly across East Anglia and southeast England for much of the day. Behind this, though, skies will clear, allowing for plenty of sunshine, but also some scattered showers that could be wintry over high ground. Now, as we go into Wednesday evening, that rain will start to clear away from the southeast, though it may linger for a time, and it will still be quite cloudy here as well overnight. Though behind that, skies will clear once again as we go